This isn't an old story. It's a harsh reality that happened in my life about 6 weeks ago. It was 2016, and I was in my second year of college. To save money, I took a house-sitting job. Professor Henderson gave me the gig. He was going to Europe with his family for 2 weeks. Their house was in a very upscale, secluded area outside the city, where the large houses were quite far apart. The house itself was huge and beautiful, surrounded by dense woods. To be honest, at first I liked the whole idea, a quiet place where I could focus on my studies. The first few days were great. I studied during the day and watched movies on their big TV in the evening. But on the fifth night, things started getting weird. It was about 9:45 p.m. and I was watching a movie in the living room when I heard a slight noise from the backyard, like someone walking on dry leaves. I ignored it, thinking it must be an animal, since the woods were right behind the house. But the sound made me uneasy, so I got up and checked all the doors to make sure they were securely locked. About an hour later, the house's landline phone started ringing. I was really surprised. Who uses a landline these days? I picked up the phone, and there was no voice on the other end, just a strange silence and the faint sound of someone breathing. Before I could say anything, the call was cut off. I dismissed it as a wrong number, but an unknown fear started settling in my heart. In this house, in this isolation, everything felt strange. I tried to reassure myself and went back to watching the movie. Close to midnight, I went to the kitchen for a drink of water when the motion sensor light in the backyard suddenly flashed on. The bright light illuminated the whole yard, which ended at the edge of the forest. For a moment, my heart stopped beating. I stared out the window, but there was no one there. The light stayed on for about a minute and then turned off. Now my fear was becoming real. This couldn't just be a coincidence. The large glass windows, which looked beautiful during the day, were now terrifying me. I felt like someone in the darkness was constantly watching me. I gathered my courage and pulled all the curtains shut. That gave me a little relief, but the feeling that I wasn't alone wouldn't leave my mind. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it, but this was only the beginning. Around 1:30 a.m., a text message arrived on my cell phone. The number was unknown. The message contained only 3 words: "You look lovely." Reading that, my hands and feet went cold. This wasn't a joke. Someone was watching me, and they knew I was in the house. I immediately tried calling the number, but the phone was turned off. I texted back, "Who are you?" but got no reply. Now I was deeply terrified. I thought I should call the police, but what would I tell them? That I got a strange message? They'd probably dismiss it as a prank. I considered that maybe it was a friend of Professor Henderson's kids playing a joke, but even that thought couldn't comfort me. I decided I would leave all the lights on and leave the house as soon as morning came. I huddled on the living room sofa. That's when I heard a faint creaking from the floorboards on the upper level. It wasn't the kind of sound old houses make. It was the sound of footsteps. Now I was certain that someone was inside the house. But how was that possible? I had locked all the doors myself. My whole body was shaking with fear. I thought maybe the person had been hiding inside the house all along. My phone rang again, the same unknown number. This time, the message was even scarier. "Are you scared?" A second message followed. "I'm going to find you." I felt like I couldn't breathe. The person was not only inside the house, but they were playing a terrifying game with me. They were enjoying my mental agony. I didn't know what to do. Should I scream? But who would hear my voice out here? Should I try to run? But what if they were near the door? In desperation, I thought about dialing 911 on my phone. I hid behind the sofa and pulled out my phone with trembling hands. That's when my eyes landed on a digital photo frame on the wall in front of me. It was cycling through pictures of the Henderson family. The frame stopped on one photo. It was a picture from one of their parties. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson were standing with their friends, and behind them, in the crowd, was a young man looking directly at the camera. He had a strange, emotionless smile on his face. It took me a moment to recognize him. This was the guy who was doing yard work here last week, when Professor Henderson was giving me instructions about the house. He had introduced him as Ryan, who worked for some company. As soon as I recognized him, another message came on my phone. "Looks like you recognize me." Now I knew who I was trapped in this house with. He had known me all along. Maybe he had planned this whole thing then. He definitely had a key to the house or knew some secret way to get in. That last message gave me the courage to fight back. I knew that if I stayed hidden, he would easily find me. I quietly grabbed the car keys lying on the table and ran with all my might toward the front door. I unlocked the door in one go and ran out into the darkness. I heard his voice from behind me. "You can't run, Caitlin." He had called out my name. I just kept running. I reached my car, started it with trembling hands, and drove away as fast as I could. I didn't look back. I went straight to the nearest police station and told them everything. The police immediately went to the house, but he was already gone. They found no signs of forced entry, which meant he had a way to get inside. This incident changed me forever. I'm still afraid to be alone at night. The police never caught Ryan. He quit his job and vanished. I often wonder what his intentions were that night. Did he just want to scare me, or did he have another purpose? But the most terrifying thing is that he knew my name and he knew I was alone in that house that night.
My name is Aaron. I rent a small house on a quiet, highly populated street in Georgia. This incident happened early last month. My neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Taylor, was in the hospital, and I was looking after her dog, Buddy. At night, her house was completely empty and silent. I would go over around 10 p.m., walk Buddy, feed him, and usually be back home by 11 p.m. That night, I had finished everything and was just about to leave. Mrs. Taylor's house was a bit old, and the back door lock was always broken. I had closed the garage door, which was always my way out. I turned off the lights, and as I reached the front section of the garage, my eyes suddenly fell on the wall. There was nothing there, but I sensed a movement. I turned around, and my mind went blank. Deep in the darkness of the garage corner, completely blocking my exit path, a man was standing. He was large, quiet, and absolutely motionless. He wasn't wearing a mask, just an old brown hoodie with the hood pulled over his head. I immediately knew this wasn't just a vagrant. He wasn't just standing, he was blocking my way. There were only about 5 feet between me and the garage door. "Who are you?" I tried to keep my voice as steady as possible, but he didn't answer. He just stood there, like he was part of the wall. I said, "Look, I was just here to check on the dog. I'm leaving now. Let me pass." This time, he took one step forward. Just one step. That step was strange too, absolutely silent, like a shadow moving. Then he tilted his head slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his eyes. They were just empty and dark. "Buddy, let you go, Aaron," he said in a very slow, deep, and sticky voice, as if he hadn't spoken in a long time. Hearing that broke all the courage inside me. How did he know my name? Why did he mention Buddy? I started backing up in a panic. Behind me was only a wall. My only way out was where he was standing. I figured if I tried to run, he would immediately lunge at me. I took a deep breath and tried to hide the terror inside me. "I don't know you. If you don't get out right now, I'm calling the police," I said, now almost shouting, though I knew no one would hear me at 11:15 p.m. The man tried to smile. It was a slight, strained smile that only pulled at the skin of his face. It didn't reach his eyes. His silence and his smile were both weapons. "Police?" he repeated. "What are you going to tell them, Aaron? That your way home got shorter?" He took another step forward. I immediately pulled out my phone, but I knew I wouldn't be able to dial. At that very moment, Buddy, who was in the kitchen next to the garage, started barking frantically, barking like crazy, as if he had just seen him. The barking was so loud that the man's face contorted for a moment. He immediately turned back and looked toward Buddy, who was visible through the kitchen door glass. That was my moment. I gathered all my strength and in a second pushed past him, opened the garage door on his flank, and ran out at full speed, slamming the door shut. I kept running without locking the door until I reached my own house and locked the door from the inside. I was shaking. I immediately called the police, but when they arrived, there was no one in the garage, only a frantically barking Buddy. I had faced this person. He knew what I was doing there, and his intention wasn't just to scare me, but to do something direct to me. I don't know who he was, but after that night, I stopped going to Mrs. Taylor's house, and now I check my own house windows every night. That person is still out there somewhere. It was a cold Chicago night, and that coldness still resonates in my heart today. I still can't believe how anyone could be so cold, so organized, and so planned in exploiting someone's fear. My name is Olivia Martin, and this incident happened about 1.5 years ago in a huge modern apartment building in Chicago, which was always considered exceptionally safe. I was renting a corner unit on the 8th floor, which offered a view of the cold, glittering city lights through its large windows. My roommate, Jessica "Jess" Reynolds, was visiting her parents in Florida that week, and I was completely alone. It was around 7 p.m. A dark December night had settled outside. In the apartment's soft, warm light, I was sitting on the sofa with my leftover Chinese takeout on the side table, working on an important office presentation on my laptop. The air had a faint dampness and the residual scent of soy sauce. Suddenly, my phone screen lit up and a soft ding sounded. It was a new text message in my inbox. The sender's number was strangely short, like an official system shortcode, and it displayed "Building Management." I put the laptop aside and opened the message. It had a tone of unusual urgency. "Alert, E-Block, 5th floor, major water main rupture. Urgent, building-wide maintenance required. All units in A-Block, 8th floor included, must be checked for manual water pressure calibration. Technician will arrive by 7:30 p.m. For emergency access, please leave your door unlocked or answer immediately. Thank you for your cooperation." The message sent a chill through me. A pipe bursting on the 5th floor was not a minor issue. My apartment was on the 8th floor and included in A block. Hearing the word emergency, I took it extremely seriously. However, the request to leave the door unlocked felt a bit strange. but the fear of a massive water main rupture suppressed my logic. I closed the laptop and looked out the window at the wet streets. A strange silence fell. Time slowed. I kept checking the clock. Exactly 7:32 p.m., the doorbell rang with two short, sharp bursts, as if the person was in a hurry. My heart skipped a beat. I slowly got up and, muffling the sound of my feet, leaned toward the peephole by the door. A man was standing outside. He was of medium height and wore a plain, dark blue uniform, which was slightly dirty around the waist. A yellow and white logo that read "Reliable Maintenance" was haphazardly stitched onto his shoulder. He held an old wooden clipboard with some papers clipped to it in one hand. His face looked tired and stressed, like he had seen several emergencies today. He raised his hand and stated his name with a slight anxiousness. Frank, A-block technician. His appearance suggested a normal worker having a burdened day. This lowered my guard slightly. I slid the security chain open and opened the door just a crack. "Hi, Frank," I said in a tired voice, standing in the doorway. The faint lobby light fell on his face. "Looks like a rough day. Where are you starting?" Frank didn't say a word. He just gave a brief nod and, without asking for permission or answering my question, pushed the door open with his right hand and stepped into the apartment. He wasn't talkative at all. His silence and urgency made me uneasy again. He immediately reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a small gray device, which looked like an old walkie-talkie or radio model. He stood right in the center of the apartment, where the largest part of the rug was, and turned the device on. He didn't touch any meter or pipe valve. The device immediately started emitting a low, continuous. The sound wasn't loud, but it was prominent in the silence. His action made no sense at all. No technician checks water pressure by standing in the center of a room with such a device. Pressure checks are always done at the water lines, meaning the bathroom or kitchen. This was not a scientific procedure. "I thought you were checking the water pressure," I said now, my voice slightly raised and filled with suspicion. "The pipe burst on the 5th floor, right?" He heard my question but ignored it. He turned, and his gaze fell on the leather briefcase by my sofa, which contained my presentation notes. His eyes lingered there for a moment. He was still holding the beeping device. "How long have you been living here, Olivia? And is your roommate at work? Is she not coming home today?" His question had nothing to do with water pipes, pressure, or maintenance. The tiredness was gone from his voice, replaced by an imperceptible, cold hardness and a measured inquiry of tone. He had used my name with an unnerving calmness and certainty. A cold wave rushed through me. Fear stopped my breathing. I realized with an intense shock that this was not a maintenance man. This was a deception. I slowly turned my right hand and tried to move toward the kitchen counter where my phone was charging. My plan was to send Jess an emergency code message or immediately call the police. "I've taken care of your phone, Olivia," he said again with that same soulless smile, his tone cold and calmly confident. He pulled another small black device out of his inner uniform pocket, shaped like a thin tube. He just gestured toward my phone with this device. At that moment, my phone screen, which had been lit up a moment before on the kitchen counter, suddenly turned black. It was either a jamming device or he had remotely disconnected my Wi-Fi or cellular service. I knew that such equipment did not belong to any reliable maintenance company. "That number I sent you wasn't the building's, it was mine. I obtained a copy of your rent application last week. I knew when Jess was leaving."
His voice was now a whisper, and I was standing completely alone with him in the middle of my living room, cut off from the outside world. What do you want?" The words struggled out of my throat, barely audible with fear. My lips were dry. He started moving slowly, very slowly, positioning himself between me and the door, as if gently pushing me into a corner. There was no anger on his face, just a strange, empty look, as if he were solving a difficult math problem. "I'm not taking anything," he said, very softly, like sharing a secret. He took one more step closer. That means he had gone to all this effort just to check how easily he could enter a single woman's home. He saw it as a test, and I was his subject. I backed up, my back hitting the edge of the kitchen counter. A sharp shock ran through my body. At that moment, my eyes fell on a small but very heavy iron pan lying near the fridge on the kitchen counter. It was our old cast iron frying pan, which Jess had washed and left upside down earlier. It was a small but very heavy weapon. Before he could take another step or say another word, I acted without thinking, quickly bending down and grabbing the heavy pan with one hand. Frank hadn't seen the movement. When he reached out to stop me, I put all my strength into swinging the pan and striking his right shoulder and collarbone with all my anger and fear. There was a sickening thud, and the pan hit the counter again with a heavy clang like metal hitting metal. He was severely hurt. A groan escaped his mouth, and he staggered. His clipboard fell to the floor, scattering a few papers. He clutched his shoulder and leaned against the wall for support. This was my golden opportunity. I didn't waste a moment. I spun around with lightning speed, dashed toward the door, unlocked the chain, and flung the door wide open. I ran out into the lobby quickly. As I ran, I started screaming at the top of my lungs, "Fire! Fire! Emergency! There's a fire!" I knew only fire would draw the most attention, and people would come out of their apartments to secure themselves. By 7:45 p.m., people from various floors started pouring out of their apartments in panic, and I saw more than a dozen people in the 8th floor lobby. As I ran toward the security guard, I looked back. Frank had vanished in the chaos. He was neither caught nor had he taken anything. The police confirmed he was neither a thief nor a building maintenance worker. He was an extremely dangerous professional con artist who just wanted to see how easily he could invade a single woman's life and give her a test. I'm not afraid of what he could have stolen. I'm afraid of who he was and what he might want next time. I left that apartment the following week. And even today, when the doorbell rings, my heart stops for a moment.
It was last fall. I was driving home from college to my parents' house in a small town in Oregon. It's the kind of town where everyone knows everyone. And to be honest, that's why I left. I deliberately chose to travel at night to avoid traffic. It was about 11:30 p.m. when I turned off the main highway onto the desolate 2-hour country road that led to my town. There were no streetlights here and no house lights for miles. I had been driving for about half an hour when suddenly the engine made a strange noise and the headlights flickered. Before I could figure out what was happening, the car jerked 2 or 3 times and shut down completely. I tried to restart it, but nothing happened. I pulled out my phone, but just as I feared, there was no signal. I was completely stranded, surrounded by dense forest and such deep darkness that it was impossible to see anything outside my car. I locked the doors and waited, hoping another car would pass by. About an hour must have passed. Only 2 cars went by during that time, and both were going so fast they probably didn't even see my car. I had almost given up hope when I saw headlights approaching from a distance. This time the vehicle was slowing down. It was an old, rusty pickup truck that slowly came to a stop near me. Its engine was rattling so loudly I thought it might break down right there too. An old man sitting in the driver's seat rolled down his window and smiled at me. He asked me at a friendly tone, "Son, everything all right?" I told him my car had broken down. He introduced himself as Howard and said he lived in the same town I was headed to. "Hop in, I'll give you a ride. You can come back with a mechanic in the morning to fix the car." I hesitated for a moment. The thought of getting into a stranger's car late at night wasn't great, but I had no other option. I thanked him and got into the truck with him. Inside the truck, there was a strange smell of gasoline and wet earth. Tools and old newspapers were scattered on the seats. Howard started the truck, and we set off. He was very talkative. He started asking me about my college, my studies, and my future plans. At first, it all seemed like normal small talk, but then his questions became too personal. He was asking questions as if he already knew me. Suddenly, he said, "How's your father, Michael, doing these days? I heard he had a back problem last month." My hair stood on end. I asked him how he knew my father. He chuckled and said, "Son, there's no one in this town I don't know. I've seen you as a kid. You probably forgot." There was weight to his words, but there was something in his tone that made me deeply uneasy. A few miles further, Howard suddenly turned the truck onto a dirt road. I nervously asked where we were going. The main road was straight ahead. He calmly replied, "This is a shortcut. We'll get there faster this way. Plus, there's construction work on the main road these days." That was an outright lie, as I had just come from that road and there was no work happening there. Now I was truly scared. This road was going deeper into the forest, and the darkness was even thicker here. His demeanor no longer seemed friendly. He started speaking in a low, serious voice. He began talking about how outsiders were ruining the town's atmosphere and how some people needed to be cleaned up. He kept looking at me and saying, "Some boys go to the city and get spoiled. They forget where their real place is." His words were rambling, but the implication was clearly directed at me. I felt like I was trapped with a predator. My gaze suddenly fell on the truck floor. There was a wallet lying there. It wasn't mine, nor could it be Howard's, as his own wallet was on the dashboard. It looked like it belonged to a young man. Then I looked through the back window into the bed of the truck. There was a shovel and a bundle of thick rope lying there. Seeing these items together confirmed my fear that I was in serious trouble. His intention was absolutely not to drop me home. Suddenly, he stopped the truck in the middle of the woods. "It looks like there's a problem with the engine. Let me check." Saying this, he stepped out of the truck. I knew this was my one and only chance. As soon as he opened the truck's hood, I quietly opened the door and ran with all my strength into the forest. I heard his voice from behind me, but he wasn't shouting in anger. He was saying in a strange, calm tone, "You shouldn't have done that, Alex. No one can run forever." I just kept running, crashing through bushes and trees, falling and getting up to run again. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually I stumbled back onto the main road, though quite a far away from where my car was parked. I was lucky that a car appeared soon after. I waved it down. A family was inside, and seeing my condition, they immediately let me in. They dropped me off at the police station in the next town.
I told the police everything, but the expressions on their faces suggested they didn't fully believe my story. They wrote down the report, but said it would be hard to find a person with that description. I called my parents from there and told them everything. They immediately rushed to pick me up. A year has passed since that incident. I have never gone back to my hometown since then. My car was later found by the police on the same road, but there was no trace of the man named Howard or his truck. Sometimes, even today, at night, I hear his cold voice. I don't know who he was or what he wanted to do with me, but I know for sure that if I hadn't run from that truck that night, I probably wouldn't be alive to tell this story today.